I'm not saying we've been recording for a while, but this is the colour of my natural hair now.
Just be thankful you've still got some. I'm going to sell my Target hardbacks and get a hair transplant. Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of our season 10 review video. Last time we had 3 Doctors topping the poll with 24 points, and Carnival of Monsters and Frontier in Space both on 21. We have got 2 stories. I can't even count. I've got 2 stories left to look at. I'm P-Bal, and I am joined once more by...
Hello, I'm James.
And hello, I'm Jason.
Hello, James and Jason. Okay. So we move rapidly on to Doctor Who and the Planet of the Daleks.
Ooh. So we left the last story with the Doctor getting accidentally shot in the last couple of seconds.
Well, that's not immediately clear during the edit, it has to be said.
It's not. It all happened so quickly, and he just ended up just falling on the floor in a heap while everyone else ran off. But yeah, so he managed
the director.
Managed to send an emergency signal to the Time Lords to tell them what was going on, and we find them on the planet Spiridon, where the Doctor is recovering from being shot, and Joe steps out of the TARDIS into quite a unhospitable planet with lots of different plants spraying deadly fungi and lots of invisible creatures and animals. It's an interesting one. And again, going back to what I was saying in the last part about Jo, she sets off on her own to try and find help for the Doctor while he's recovering. So again, we've got another story where Jo and the Doctor are separated quite a bit throughout the story, sort of coming together a bit later on.
She does indeed get lots to do in this one. But my eye is drawn immediately at the start of this story to the amazing IKEA bedroom furniture that appears in the console room at the start of this story, which is immediately turned into the Doctor's makeshift bed to get him well again. It is, for me, always a delight to see the Daleks on screen. I'm sure you wouldn't have guessed by now that I'm a big fan of the Daleks. But here comes Terry Nation, and he's back after quite a number of years' absence, actually. I believe his last story that he would have written the script for was The Feast of Stephen. And here he comes, commissioned to write this particular story, which is a 6-part. You know, some would be fair to say that this is a
retelling of
the original Dalek story with just a few tweaks. But you know what? I think it's good, healthy fare for this season. We need a Dalek story in every season, and this is it. And I have to say that the studio set of Spiridon is absolutely amazingly realized. And you know, that whole sort of jungle set there, and all the sort of fungus plants and all it gives it a really claustrophobic feel, which is kind of nice. A firm favorite of mine, this story.
I mean, sorry, it's because the TARDIS set, it has got so many IKEA multifunctional pieces going on. It's incredible. I like his gas cylinders as well, which are big old school gas cylinders. He pushes the button for emergency gas.
Never to be seen again. Used once, never seen again.
If only there were a play set that had all those little bits on it. I mean, it'd be like Sod Barbie. That's a proper old multifunctional house for Doctor Who to live in.
I'm not entirely sure how one tiny canister though can sort of fill the entire console room.
See, now I can more of this anon, but I can remember when this was repeated, because that's one of the reasons I love this story, is because I can remember watching it repeated in '93, so that's how I watched it for the first time. I remember going into school the next day, and 2 of my friends, Sarah and Emily, for record, you don't remember them when you're like 10, can you? looked at me and said, we watched Doctor Who last night, because basically this is an era where you'd have one Doctor Who fan per 6,000 people. It would, it's not like today, kids, where you can watch it on BritBox and everyone loves Doctor Who. This was like you were the oddball with the T-shirt on non-uniform day. So Sarah and Emily said that we watched Doctor Who last night. Why did he change his clothes when he was running out of oxygen? It's like, oh, I hated that thing. And so, I mean, it doesn't bother me now, but that thing of being a kid and going, oh, that literally makes no sense. He's about to die from oxygen starvation, so he gets changed. He's like, I can't die in green. I think plum is what I want to die in. It's true. If you watch it back, he runs out of oxygen and gets changed, unless the oxygen changes the color of his clothes, maybe.
It might have been it might have been like a little half a regeneration there going on. He regenerated his
just
clothes.
A velvet regeneration.
Maybe this is a vain side of the Third Doctor. You never realise, that he's like, I'm not going to die in this, so I'm going to go and get changed.
Yeah, that's an obscure memory on it. But I mean, the first episode is sort of owned by Katy, and she I mean, you can act against the cassette case and convince everyone that that's something impressive. That's all kudos there.
But it's supposed to be a direct sequel to the Daleks, and it's even referenced when the Thals turned up, and they talk about the Doctor and Barbara and Ian and Susan and the Tardis, and there is that moment where you're just like, oh yeah, these are the same Thals that they encountered before, but the whole setup is so similar. You've got the Daleks inside their sort of city base, not quite ready to venture out, and the Thals on the outside, trying to stop them. So yes, you could be pinicky and say, actually, it's a very similar story. But I think there's some really good performances in here. And there are some really, the Invisible Dalek. That, I know some people got different views on that, but when I was watching this for the first time, that was like, oh my God, how invincible would they be if they were also invisible? And so that sort of big reveal is a really key, memorable point for me within this episode. There's lots of techno babble around how that comes to be, and all the sort of explanations, etc. But that was a huge thing with this story. A bit like later on when you see all the Daleks in the underground cavern. There's 10,000 of them. Admittedly, they were all sort of Louis Marx figures, weren't they? They were toys, but there is also that sort of feeling that there's an epic Dalek army there ready to take over the universe. So it kind of links to the other, the last story, because they were trying to weaken Earth and Draconia so that they could sweep across with their new army. But there's some really good imagery on here as well.
But
go on.
As a plot point, and I think I might have discussed this previously, right? The Doctor sends a message to the Time Lords to tell them to send the TARDIS after the Daleks. He lands, and after he's recovered and changed clothes, talks to the Thals, who he knows are after the Daleks, essentially. And then in the jungle, he hears the mechanics of something breaking down. And then he's really surprised when it's a Dalek. You went there to follow the Daleks. You are with the Thals, who are there because of the Daleks. What did you think it was going to be? Did you think it was going to be a quark?
Is it not? Oh, is it not though the shock of seeing an invisible Dalek though? Is it not? That's the thing that he's so surprised at.
Is it that much of a shock for him though? Because you can see the Dalek-shaped space where it has stopped as well. Because you have the line from Bernard Horst goes, now you can see what we're up against. Daleks. Yes, the reason you went to this inhospitable jungle planet. Daleks. I don't know. I mean, I love it, and I will forgive all manner of terrible things, but it is one of those things. Just like, you know, and for the viewer, obviously, it's like Planet of the Daleks. They were in the last episode. We know it's not a shock when they rock up in the last 2 minutes, is it? But the Daleks get out and about. Don't you mean about them being confined to the city? They get out and about, and they get out and about invisible.
Yeah, but there isn't many of them that are active. I mean, again, here you've got the same ones that they used for Day of the Daleks. You've got one extra one from Terry Nation's estate, which he got from the movies, and then you've got 7 wooden replicas, which is why there are scenes like when Katie's getting out of the sort of you know, the wagon that she's hidden in, and there's a Dalek right next to her, but it doesn't see anything because it's a wooden replica, because there was 7 sort of wooden props that didn't do anything, so they never move. So they were limited. There might have been 10,000 toy ones in the basement, but there was only sort of 5 working ones for the story.
They do get out of the city, though.
They do get out of the city, but what I mean is that they haven't yet sort of defrosted or reactivated their entire army. So there's not a massive amount of them.
But those Louis Marx Daleks, they are good quality, aren't they?
They don't look particularly.
No, they're not.
I will say,
let's be honest, they're not. And it's not the first time they've been used in Doctor Who to show a massive Dalek army in some way.
And Barry Letts didn't like it at all, but they were just like, this is what we've done. It's like...
But it does spring the question that you have that really camp gold Dalek with the flashing torch eye, and that's not the Dalek that Jason chose to have in his house. They would seem like a natural pairing somehow. I don't get it.
I would actually have the jazz hands if I had that Dalek in my house. Let me tell you, with that torch and all the gold bling going on, I would absolutely love it.
It's amazing when he rocks up, and he's a little bit sassy, isn't he? He's like, "You failed. I'm going to kill you now."
Yeah, I'm having you. You're out here. I'm having you. We don't like you at all. And it is quite a shock when it turns up as well, because it is quite obviously so different to the standard BBC props at the time. But then I suppose in some respects, it is the Supreme Dalek, and therefore should have a slightly different stature. I mean, I forget that they borrowed it off Nation because they were running out of props, but actually, I don't think it hurts the story with the Supreme being quite as different and quite as obviously blinged up as it is.
And most people still at this point, I mean, unless you're rich, would still have been watching in black and white anyway, actually.
Oh, quite possibly, actually, yes.
See? I'm culturally aware as well, Jason.
I mean, I was 3 at the time when this went out and didn't see it, so but we would have probably had a black and white television at the time in the house, I would have thought. Okay, so basically, I think I'm loving this story so far. I love the jungle set. I love the Daleks. I love the fact that we've got Thals in it. There are some great little set pieces in this one as well, particularly the escape up the chimney chute as you're in that sort of episode 3. And actually, while I'm on episode 3, the recolorization of this on the Blu-ray really sings. It is amazing. It's hard to believe that this does not exist in color. It is only a story that exists an episode that exists in black and white, but the love that went into the recreation of this color back into the episode is amazing. But there are some great little set pieces, as you'd expect from a standard Nation Dalek script.
The same script. No, obviously different script. No, I do like that bit where they float out of the sort of chimneys. You know, they talk about ventilation shafts as a joke within Doctor Who, but they literally do to float through. You've got the Dalek cutting through the polystyrene with a soldering iron, which is quite funny. What about the ice volcano then? So, you know, this is supposed to be like super cold fluid, and they're all like putting their hands in it or like standing in it. it's rather odd. I find that they're sort of like handling this goop and sort of.
But some of that's surface, isn't it? It's rather than deep end. So that if it's been in the atmosphere, because you've got the hot days and the whatever they do describe the scenario with the weather, don't they?
The stones.
I'd imagine that the surface pools wouldn't be quite as bad as it would be deeper down. That's what I say. The locations are great. Katy, naughty girl, gets a haircut in between studio and location, so they don't match up. But yeah, there's lots of fun. I like all that sort of Dalek in the what's in and the reaction, because you don't see the mutant, do you? But they do have the sort of, you hear the splosh of it being scooped out, and obviously no similarities between Ian getting into the Dalek and Rebek getting into the Dalek.
None at all. It's not a reused part of the script at all, is it?
But then I sort of also kind of think, because I mean, bless him, Terry was quite adept at this, and I forget. Friend Stephen pointed out there was one thing where he did 2 episodes of like the Persuaders and the Avengers. He basically sold them both the same story, and they were broadcast on the same night. It was the same. You could mirror scenes from it. It's slightly more forgivable, I think, on this point, in that it would have been 10 years. So, I mean, you probably would have seen the film maybe on a sort of circuit by this point, but it's not sort of the way we have it now, is it? I think if you'd made that in 1963 and people had watched it, the general public as a whole, the sort of 10, 12 million people watching this, would be like, hang on a moment, this is very much like Doctor Who's second story, I think.
But you know my feeling about the original Dalek story from 1963. We've already reviewed it. It's on one of our other videos, and I love this story. You know, the actual premise of the script, it works just as well in 1973 as it did in 1963. So I'm not sitting here and criticizing Terry for having effectively resold the original script back in. Who's to say it wasn't an anniversary plan underneath the surface of it that we're not aware of, which we know it isn't. But the story, when it was first written, was actually a good story. So to effectively represent it again in color and change the setting and odd little bits in it, it doesn't detract from it. And I still think it's a good story, even if it is just a rehash of the original Dalek series.
Terrence Dix has the anecdote, doesn't he, that I'm not sure whether it's this story or the next, but Terry Nation submitted it. He said, "It's a lovely idea, Terry, but you've already sold us that one last year," or something. And I think that was a very Terrence anecdote. The good thing about this as well is it's the penultimate Dalek story before it comes to the Davros show, which might be my slightly unpopular opinion. That once Davros is in, that you get Davros and the Daleks rather than the Daleks and Davros. I think it's death to follow. Obviously, the year after is Dalek, but this is their pretty much their last big flight of sort of the epic, the 6th part of the Daleks being the protagonist and a supreme Dalek. Everything gets a bit kind of Davros-y when we get to Tom Baker.
And they're still sufficiently sort of menacing in this story. I know, obviously, Davros is introduced to sort of shift things around a bit, reboot them almost. But they have their own characters. It's really weird when you consider what they're supposed to be, but like the 2 that are inside the germ, where they're looking at the virus, and Weston comes in and smashes the vial, and they're like, freaking out about the fact that they're now trapped in there. They have their own sort of individual personalities, which actually makes them slightly more scarier than some of the ones that you see later on, where they're just purely autonomans that just have that sort of one exterminate and that's it. So I think the Daleks in this episode are really good. They work. They're quite schemers. They're quite manipulative. They know what they're about. That works for me. And even when the Doctor fries that one with using the little device and fries its brain, and he even says, I'm not a man of violence, but I really enjoyed that. It's kind of like, it's a really weird thing to say, but they are quite menacing in this story. There
is the touching bit, so just before that, where I think you really get a sense from Jon's point that he thinks that Joe's been killed. It's actually quite a touching thing, that because you get a lot of, I think later in the next season it becomes a bit of a recurring thing that Sarah Jane keeps thinking that the Doctor's dead, and then he's not, and she thinks he's dead, then he's not, and she thinks he's dead. And I'm thinking of the Monster of Peladon, where that happens about 3 times an episode. But in this context, it's actually really effective because he does genuinely believe that he's failed and that she's a gone. She's not. But we're also talking of the Joe character arc. We get another potential Lerva in this grant.
Oh, Latep, is it? Latep?
Lartep.
Lartep.
I'm Larteping rather than Lateping.
But don't you feel that that's, again, a bit like the last story? It's kind of jammed on at the end. It's like, oh, we spent a little bit of time together, and I really fancy you. And she's just like,
you don't see what they do in the jungle. I mean, they hold hands and run around a bit, but they might have a little canoodle next to a spirodon bush. You don't know. Lie against a warm rock on the plain of stones. Might have been a little bit that you didn't want to see. It's a family show. They can't show everything.
It does set up very nicely though the next episode. So you have this dynamic where Joe, after that conversation, says to the Doctor, "I want to go home." He is all like, "Let me, we've got rid of a suitor for you. That's great. You're mine. I want to take you around the universe." And she just goes, "No, Doctor, I want to go back to Earth." And I again, that development of Joe, she's not the blindly following assistant anymore. She wants, she knows her own mind. She said no to this guy. She simply just wants to go back to Earth. And you see that continue in the next story, and it's building to that moment, and that moment comes pretty quickly in the next story. I'm sure we will talk about that in just a moment.
Indeed, it does. Daleks are not the easiest thing to direct, but I think David Maloney's return after the War Games, this is his first story back. I think he services this story extremely well. There are directors that have been on record saying that the Daleks are actually not the easiest of things, but I think he brings the story to life here, and he obviously brings with him his standard casting in Bernard Horsfall as well. Obviously, they're part of the same troupe, if you like. But I think there's some great cast. There's some great supporting cast running in this story as well. So I think it's an all-round. It's a good, solid story. This one.
I mean, Prentice does his manic, I think. Tim Priest, great. Jane Howe as well. Love Jane Howe. So lots. Yeah, there are lots of great points, and I think also Roy Skelton is nice as Wesley. It's nice that he gets a bit more than the monster voices. It's a bit more of a character part to have a go at. Yeah, and I also I don't mind that it's 6 parts either. I'm mindful of these things, obviously, once a week, but I don't feel that it has that kind of point. I mean, it doesn't have that point where it's like, oh, they've been locked up again. I think it covers itself well. I think it keeps going at a good pace.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think as a 6th part of this doesn't feel like it's outstaying its welcome at all, and feels fairly tight.
So, we think we're heading to a score on Planet of the Daleks.
Yes, I believe so.
We haven't got any more stats.
No, you've had my stats.
It's part 3, and am I wrong in saying it's the last prime time black and white broadcast on the BBC? I could be right.
Possibly would have been. Yes.
I know it's the Dalek sound, the extermination sound is only for this story, and then they change it in the next one, and then that's the sort of familiar one for the whole of the 80s.
No, I have that in Day of the Daleks, the same noise.
No, it's slightly different for this one, apparently.
I'll believe you, babes, but I haven't heard Day of the Daleks recently enough. Yeah, no, sorry, I'm always good. My mindful of my first series was the '93, and you have those little documentaries that Kevin Davies did that are so sort of slightly synonymous with it for me as well. And part 3 had the missing episode 1 and all that. Anyway, scores. Jason, I think Jason's going to like this one. Although I should, preempt. Is he going to give it more or less than he gave the original telling of this story? But,
well, I can remember the score I gave the original telling of this, and I
can remember the original story.
I remember it very well because I've watched it a number of times. I think I gave the original Daleks an 8, actually, out of memory. James, put your drashing away, please, honey. You don't need to be flashing that around in the screen behind me while I'm doing my summary. I like this story. I think essentially because I'm a big Dalek fan. I think it's well realized. I love the studio set on this one on the planet. Joe gets a huge amount to do. The Doctor's recovering, and the telling of the story works well. And even if it is a rehash of the original Dalek story, I liked that as well. So all things being considered on this one, I'm going to give Planet of the Daleks a very, very healthy 7.5.
7.5 from Clifford. What has James got for us, other than his drashig?
I don't know what you mean. So I also love this story for many of the reasons that I've already said. I think that you really are seeing Jo's character now just completely flourish. I love the way she builds allies as she goes through this story. She's completely fearless. She's like sneaking in and out of the Dalek base. She's really come into her own, and she knows her own mind. She's at that point where she's not necessarily equal with the Doctor, but she stands toe to toe with the Doctor, and she, at the end rejects, the advance and just says, "I want to go home. Yeah, I want to go back to Earth." And I love that. And the story is a good story. It might be a retelling of a story, but it was a good story to begin with. So I don't mind the fact that it's slightly retold. And I went with an 8 for Planet of the Daleks.
8 points. It's tense, isn't it? It's always tense. I'm surprised. I thought Jason was actually going to go a bit higher than that.
I thought it was too.
He's a contrary scorer by any means.
I've given it the score I believe it deserves. I gave the original Daleks 8. Planet of the Daleks is a retelling of that story with 1 or 2 flaws in it that the original didn't have for me. So that's where my 7.5 came from.
Imagine if they called it the Dead Planet of the Daleks. Just completed it for everyone. Do you know what? Planet of the Daleks is one of my favourites. I mean, not like all-time favourite, but it's on the route there. It'd be in my sort of top 30 maybe. That's such a fan ranky thing to do. A fan ranky thing.
Someone's going to put in the comments, name them.
Yeah. No, they'll just be like, God, you like all the camp ones you do. What's wrong with you? I just really like, and it's one that I will watch for enjoyment. I'll put it on, and I actually like watching it. Is it the best Doctor Who story ever in terms of everything? Probably not. But in terms of what I shall give it, or what I feel about it, and how I like it, I am giving Planet of the Daleks. I had to check that I'd written it down there. 9.
Ooh.
Oh yeah,
that's very good.
That's a good score.
That's a good score.
Which lands the Planet of the Daleks on a not too shabby 24.5.
Oh.
Can you imagine if they'd introduced Davros into that story? You would have been like, 2.
It would have been dead to me. Dead to me. If they'd have gone down that basement, there was Davros. I'd have had the air corridor pumped to the max. I would. I'd have been clinging to that tarpaulin. Get out of there. Leave him behind. You'll steal all your plots. Yes. Well, we are now rolling on to the series finale, which is The Green Death. Jason was super moist when we went to Wales for Delta and the Bannermen. So how does The Green Death leave you?
Mac and devastation, I tell you now, Mac and devastation. We're off to Land Fairfax to get a little bit too close to some giant maggots. Look, I'm going to love any story that's set in Wales, okay? So that's always going to be worth at least a couple of points before I get anywhere. And, you know, environmental issues to the one side here, which I know Letts and Dicks were concerned about. I love this story. It is clearly the season closer. It's building to, you know, the departure of a very much loved companion. We've got Earth again. We've got Unit. We've had a complete break from Unit throughout the whole of season 10. And this is a pretty good end to the season. What else can I say about it? I'll talk it through as we go, but I'm going to tell you this. This is definitely for me one of the best of the season.
And now we get explanation. I'm hoping this is where we get explanation of the cosplay.
Yeah, so I as you can see behind me, you've got the Doctor dressed as the cleaning woman. You also get the Doctor dressed as the milkman, as he keeps trying to get into global chemicals. We're back on Earth, as Jason says, and right from the off, and just to pick up on what I was just saying about the last episode, you have this wonderful scene at the beginning where the Doctor's banging on about going to Metebelis 3. Joe's reading the newspaper where she's hearing about global chemicals. They're both talking at cross purposes and not listening to each other. They're both sort of saying, oh, this is what we're going to do. He thinks she's agreed to go with him. She's reading the newspaper and go, well, I'm packing my bags. The Brigadier walks in and she's prepared to defy both her authority figures, you know, her boss and her, you know, mentor, if you like, because of something she really believes in. And I that scene to me sets up the rest of the story, because the Doctor even says, you know, the fledgling has flown the coop right at the beginning of the episode. So you know that sets you up for what's going to happen. And I think it's the heartbreak, the Doctor's heartbreak at the end, where they have this great adventure, and then at the very end, he's expecting her to say, oh, you know, I'm going to turn Cliff down and I'm going to come with you, you know, back on our adventures. And she doesn't. And it's the first time you get to see that moment where the Doctor's just like, oh, okay, you know, here's a crystal, I'm off. You know, and there's lots to talk about with the story, but for me, that's the thing that when I watch this story, I know that point is coming. I know that moment is at the end of the story. But every time it sort of tugs at the heartstrings, because you don't normally get to see the Doctor that emotional, and you get to see Jo as a completely different character than you did at the very beginning when she came in. And I said about there being parallels. When she goes to the nut hutch the first time, when she meets Professor Jones, there is a similarity between that scene and the first scene where she met the Doctor, where she sort of blunders in and she knocks things over and she's really clumsy, and it's almost like Jo from the very first story. And he's like, you know, sit down, don't touch anything. You know, he's really patronizing to her, and she doesn't yet know who he is. And I like that, because it's just so much like the moment when she walked in and said, you know, I'm your new assistant. And he was like, oh no, you know. And the dynamic between the Doctor and Jo has grown so strongly, and then you see that transition again between her and Clifford Jones, but it plays out a lot quicker, and he realizes very quickly the kind of person that she is because of the Doctor's influence. She even says, you know, he's like a younger version of you, which is a bit of a slap in the face, really, but she means it out of all love and affection, because her relationship with the Doctor is very special, but it's not on the show a romantic connection. It is one of a sort of mentor father figure, and then she finds someone that reminds her of the Doctor, and she, you know, like I say, she knows her own mind. She knows what she wants, and she goes off and, you know, gets married and goes up the Amazon.
All she was waiting for was Cliff to take her up the Amazon. It's interesting because, I mean, there's a sort of oft said thing, isn't it, when companion actors they ask me how I wanted to leave, said, "Oh, don't marry me off, don't marry me off," as if it's a sort of crime you want to have a grisly. But because it's done really well, I mean, she doesn't just, it's as I often say, it's not the Leela thing where she turns around to the nearest man on the set and goes, "I'm going to marry him." It's all the way through, and there's some very subtle bits of acting where he just puts his hand on her hand or something, or it's beautifully built up. And she's obviously seen the universe and decided she wants to save the world, and that's quite nice that's her journey and her story. I mean, not just, I think, in that final scene, it floors me every time, actually. I mean, without being indulgent here, we did a stage thing once where I interviewed Katy. We did little clips from different stories, and we had that clip from The Green Death. I could see that she was going, and then I was going. He's like, "Oh my God," some it's just embarrassing, but it's still got that power. Even 40 times down the line, you still have that impact. But it isn't just, I think, the Doctor and Joe. You also have some very subtle. Yates, who obviously was sort of initially thought over the first 2 stories or something was going to be a love interest. So he looks a little bit indignant. He's like, "Oh, I've missed my chance," kind of thing. And there are just, you can see it on everybody. But I think it probably feels raw enough because it is really Katy leaving the show, and and it's a big thing. And I think that's why it's so potent. And then the beautiful shot. I mean, Michael's directing that beautiful shot with the sun, and then the upside down title sequence. I can't tell. Was it an experiment, or did they just run it the wrong way? You get a few upside downers, don't you? But it's a really powerful ending. But but I would say if I were just scoring it on Joe's departure, it would be an incredible score. But I'm slightly left cold by the rest of it.
Ooh. I disagree, but I'll come on to that in a second. I just want to say that this is the sort of start of the Yates story, because in this one he obviously gets sort of mind control by Boss. He loses Joe. We then start to see him not turn rogue, but you get to see the fact that he's quite damaged by the end of this story. He's then going to crop up in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, where he's kind of on the wrong side, and then you have this sort of bit more of a redemption in Planet of the Spider. So I quite like the fact that that this story doesn't just end, and I know it's really starting to come to the end of the unit stories, but you still have that character development for him going through another couple of stories, which is nice. I like that.
It's a story that you could maybe find out more about in Operation Hate, available from Phantom.
Ooh, I'll tell you what, always there. I agree with you. I agree with you, James. I think this does give him the sort of thing that takes Mike Yates up to the end of the Pertwee era, and it feels like we've turned a corner in this story, because we are now on. We're going to lead into the next season. We've lost Joe. Mike's damaged, and it feels like the whole of we'll come to season 11 at some point, but season 11's that sort of closed down. It will start to wrap up all the stories, and we'll start to aim towards the back end of Jon's era. I love this story for a number of reasons, but none more so than the way you've described that end scene, because it gets me as well, just equally as much as it does you guys. And I've watched this one like you over and over again, and it is quite touching. But there are some other nice bits in this as well. Is the development of the relationship as they come through it. You've got the good old mining mystery that they're trying to solve. So you've got good solid Welsh cast coming in here. You've got stalwart Talvin Thomas, who's always there if you need somebody very good for Welsh. And you start off with that mystery. What's the green glow? What's happening here? And there is that whole undercurrent of the environmental thing that's sitting there as well. So obviously global chemicals is a baddie. And you've got, I just think you've got everything that you would need in a good Doctor Who. It's very Doctor Who, this story, in a number of ways.
It's one of those ones where you say, what story do you remember from your childhood? It's the one with the maggots. There are certain episodes that generations remember. It's either the Auton smashing through a window, first time they see a Dalek, or the giant maggots. And when you watch it now, okay, it may not look as good, but I just love that idea. That this chemical plant is pumping waste into this mine. It's creating these giant maggots that are turning into these, weirdly beautiful creatures. I know it's not particularly brilliantly realised, but you do feel sort of sorry for the fact that the only one that hatches gets basically killed by the Doctor's scarf. But there is, I write in my notes, this is woke before woke was invented, because this is the story that when people bang on about modern Who being so political and all of that, and we've just talked about several political stories, this is the one where I just throw back and go, have you ever seen The Green Death? Because there is so much, I mean, even at the beginning where he's standing there going, jobs for all is Neville Chamberlain, basically. He's reenacting that moment where he's standing outside the chemical plant. It's all about pollution. And, we know that Katy herself is a big, passionate, sort of advocate for, getting rid of plastics and saving the environment. And this was like so many years ago, yet still we are in the same position where, you've got people fighting against global corporations who are looking to exploit natural resources and cause pollution, and in Welsh towns where the pits closed and the economy fell down, and so someone coming in and promising jobs for everybody was another thing that happened quite a lot at that time. So for me, I like all of that. I like the fact that it's set in that sort of environment which could almost be happening today. It's a story that you could watch now and go, actually, there's lots of things around that I recognize in today's society. It'd be Greta Thunberg or whatever her name is, just at the gates protesting about it, but it's still the sort of thing that we see now.
But isn't the story, I think for me, slightly muddied by it's a corporation that's causing the pollution, but then it's a psychotic computer that's it's built itself, or it's where's Boss come from? Boss is just is then running. If it was just I think a villainous good guy, just a human person, there was the moral question of it just being Stevens, is he a bad guy because he's doing this, rather than the computer control? It's almost like it felt like it needed they wanted to put a sci-fi element in. I don't know where that sits with it, because then it doesn't, I mean, we have discussed the linear nature of going through a story and making sense of it. If you just look at it as giant maggots coming from the bad pollution guys, that's fine. But if you sort of break it into what it's about, it just doesn't feel like it flows properly for me from that point of view, the story elements of what comes and how it links together.
I guess there's no explanation as to how Boss came to be. In my mind, when I first watched this as a kid, I just imagined that there was this supercomputer that was built, but then it became a megalomaniac. It developed its own personality and it started to take over things. I mean, you don't necessarily get to see that happen. It's already sort of mid-flow. But
what's it trying to do though? Because if you granted that it's decided it wants to become take over the world, would it want to take over the world? And it keeps talking about efficiency and saying, oh, this isn't efficient or this is efficient. Well, non sort of movable contaminated waste and mutant diseased bugs.
I mean,
don't
it
seem
talks
like an efficient.
Yeah, it does talk about having like units that it's already taken. The idea is that there's already a whole load of people that have been converted that are ready to become its army, if you like. And I think that's a side of the toxic waste that's creating the maggots. I think it's already taken over a number of people. It's got 10 other sites across the world. It's looking to take over sort of world domination. And I think for me, I try not to think about it too much, because this is one of those stories where you start to overanalyze it, and maybe everything doesn't necessarily make sense. But I think it's a suitable backdrop to all the other things that are going on that we've talked about. I think, sometimes we come across a story where the villain takes a bit of a back step because there's so much character action going on and there's development and things going on. And I think in this story, that's the way I see it. It's a suitable plot device, if that's the right way of saying it. We see Yates being brought in, we see what happens to him with him being taken, his mind being controlled. It gives the Doctor lots to do. He's forever breaking in and out of the place. So I don't think too dimly on it.
But if it had just been Stevens that was doing that, you could still have had all those elements in it, if that makes sense. Stevens could have been doing the mind control. I think I find the story, which is very similar to Doctor Who and the War Machines, I think I find Votan a bit more believable than Boss.
Yeah.
Maybe that's.
I mean, in the end, he tries to. Boss tries to sort of merge with Stevens, doesn't he? He tries to take him over, and again, you've got the Doctor at the last minute with the Metabolus 3 crystal. Finally got there. Not sure he really wanted to stay very long, but finally got there, got his crystal, and then he used that to defeat Boss.
Yeah, that whole Metabolus 3 thing at the start of this particular story is a lot of fun, isn't it? Let's face it, we've been leading up to Metabolus 3 throughout this season, and then we finally get there, and it's actually not anywhere near what you think it's going to be like. And interestingly, was filmed in a forest just up the road on the Welsh locations when they were out in Wales. So and just lit very nicely. But yeah, Metabolus 3 is a letdown, and then it's transformed when we see it again next season. But yeah. Nice that we finally get there. I suppose it's a bit of closure on the whole piece that's been going on through the season, isn't it?
But from the moment he gets there, that's the end of the Third Doctor, isn't it? So I suppose that's the horrible reality of that storyline. He really wants to get there, and from the moment he gets there and taps the crystal, he's gone. True. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be a hater on the Green Death, because I don't hate it. I just don't think it's as it just doesn't fill me with the love that a lot of people have for it, and I don't quite know why. Because I'd love to love it, because there's a lot of things that, and the end scene, as I say, floors me. And one of the greatest Doctor Who lines ever: "I'm up on the slag heap with the Professor." What more could a girl want to say? Maybe that's just me. That's a great line, and there's the nice bit with Sergeant Benton feeding the maggot.
Yeah.
Nice. That's a nice input. I don't know. It just doesn't quite gel for me, and it doesn't gel for me in a way that it could do. And yeah, I mean, because you also have that cheeky sort of, there's a little spark there, isn't there, with Nancy and Benton as well. There's a sort of a hint that something might have gone off there with Nan. Call her Nan?
Yeah.
Mum.
Nan. They call her. Yeah, they call her lots of things during the episode.
Yeah, and obviously you have that very strange thing where Tony Adams gets unwell and just changes.
And Roy Skelton comes in and takes over the last of his lines in episode 5.
Yeah, just, who would have noticed? Yeah, I just I don't know, it doesn't quite hit for me, and but I do know it's one that everyone does seem to love. I mean, I think the biggest shame, and I always say this, is that we didn't get more Professor Jones like later. I mean, obviously we had Katy back for Sarah Jane, which is lovely, and she said, "Oh, it'd been great if he'd have just been in the car to beat the horn and say, come on." And you know, I mean, it is just one of those things. You think, gosh, the amount of things that Big Finish churn out. Why have we not got Professor Jones with Joe Grant? Is it, you know?
We did get the wonderful box set trailer though, with the Autons. Oh, and the maggots as well.
And the maggots,
the two of them.
So
just a little...
there's facts. Is the fact?
No,
actually, here we go. Stato's off again.
It's gone the facts. Are they verified?
Fact,
you need a jingle. I think we've got to the point where we now need a jingle for the stats.
No, not a jingle. He needs like Heidi High. He needs ding, 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 ding. Little glockenspiel.
Here comes the facts, everybody.
Here come the facts. Oh, he's got his gloves on as well. He's got his rubber gloves on. Look, he's doing the full cosplay today.
Synthetic wig and rubber gloves. You must be quite warm.
I literally cannot move for the static setting off of fire around me. It's more of a myth buster because it is widely believed that some of the maggots were actually condoms which were filled. But Michael E. Bryant said on the DVD commentary that actually it wasn't, it was party balloons. But people still believe that there were condoms that were scattered around everybody.
But what does Colin Mapson say? Because he actually made it.
Wow.
I'll ask him. Got his phone number.
If he's watching,
not now. I could do it now, but if he just answers the phone, going, "Who's this?" It'd be really awkward. Because isn't it fox skulls that they use for the teeth?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And they rehearsed it at the Acton Hilton. I could know all the anecdotes.
Oh my lord!
Do we have that was a myth buster, but do we have any facts?
It was the last time that the Pertwee logo, that particular logo, was used until the 1996 TV movie.
And the last time we see the title sequence as well in all its glory. And it's one of my favourite title sequences throughout the history of Doctor Who. I just love the music at this time, that sort of hammer at the start of each episode, but the whole closing and the whole sort of red and different sort of colours. Sums up 70s Doctor Who for me massively.
And the last episode goes over 26 minutes. There's a couple that almost 26 minutes, so it's quite an overrunner. So they must have been very confident with their material. Well, there we go. But I suppose the other thing that we haven't mentioned, and obviously that is related to your cosplay, is Mr. Pertwee is obviously having a riot of a time being the milkman and the cleaner and doing a bit of business, I think they call it.
Playing very much to his strengths here, isn't he, in this?
So I think time is now, as Moloko would wisely say. Yeah?
Yes.
So as Jason is near Llanfairfach, should we go to him first for his score?
Oh, Malcolm Devastation coming back here now with me. Okay, so I said at the start, I think this is, for me, probably the pick of the season. Only just, but pick of the season. I think there are lots that I like about the story. Can't get away from the fact that it's Joe's or Katy's last story. And I think it's so very, very well handled. Lots of little actiony bits to get your teeth into. A good Doctor Who story underneath it all. Yes, okay, there's, you've obviously got the some of the political elements in this, as they've had in pretty much all of the stories. It feels a little bit like, apart from the Three Doctors, but I like it, and I think it's a good, solid Doctor Who story. For me, the score is going to come in at a solid 8.
8 points from Clifford. How much is James and his? I don't know whether we should just keep going, just as if he passes out from the heat from that lot.
Please.
That's just my masochistic element coming in. It's like, shall we think a little longer about what we're going to score this?
So, it may come as no surprise that I love this story. Not just dressing up as old cleaners. There's so many things. I mean, I love the character development we've talked about. I love the iconic giant maggots. I try not to overthink some of the minor plot holes. I just adore this. So it's a 10 from me. It's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite episodes. I love it. Could sit and watch this anytime, and I always get teary-eyed at the end when she goes and he drives off. I'm getting teary-eyed now. Well, either that or the synthetic wig is getting in my eye.
Do you watch it usually dressed like that, or is that just on this occasion?
Just with the rubber gloves.
Just the rubber glove, nothing. Just the rubber gloves. Very, very clean house.
Yeah.
Well, much like any good Eurovision scoring, where you've had the high scores and then you hit this public televote, and everyone goes, "What actually just happened there?" Green Death. I honestly want to love it. I would like Donna Summer love to love it. I don't, and I always find myself. I start with the first episode and I think great, and I love all that stuff and I love it. I love that, and then it just buggers off for about 5 episodes where I'm just like, I don't care. And then you have the end scene and it breaks my heart. And I think, well, if I was scoring this, and I've said it already about 8 times now, if I was scoring this on the last scene, it would be a 10. But I'm not. I'm scoring it on all 6 episodes. With that in mind, The Green Death is a 6 from me. Oh,
Jason's face. Jason, are you there, Jason?
I am there. And it's a perfectly valid score.
Can we do a retake, Mr. Hartnell? I'll hold up what you got to say, and you can say it again.
No, do you know what? I think it's a perfectly valid score for the story. I mean, it was not a 10 for me. I think I agree with you. I think if it was the last scene, yes, you would be scoring it a 10. But there are other considerations in the story, and as it's James's favourite story of all time, it appears. A 10 seems to be the equivalent score to give it.
He did also give 10 to Kimber, so I'm not sure whether we should necessarily listen to everything he says.
Stand by my 10s.
It's all right. I'm just waiting for Dougie and Lala, then it'll all be 10s. So I read your feedback, and I love you all. So therefore, shall I do the score for Green Death, or shall I do the rundown? Let's do the rundown.
Do the rundown.
Okay. I mean, it's high scoring. I think some of these have got more than actually entire seasons have got for us previously. Joined 4th place, Carnival of Monsters and Frontier in Space. They both ended on 21. Joins, Jason looks like he's died. You still with us?
No, I'm here. No, I am here.
Okay. I thought it would be the first ever season review. It ends terminally. You'd be like, oh, it's all right. Don't say, here, we'll edit a goodbye from another video. It's fine. How do you know?
He's run off with Professor Jones at the end of the season.
We'll just fade him to black and put a little tribute card. It's fine.
Bit of Marmite. Just
yeah, just stick the Marmite in the next video. No one will notice.
1941 to 2021. Joint second on 24 points, 3 Doctors and the Green Death, which means our season winner by half a point on 24.5. It could have been like bloody Eurovision 69. We could have had a big tie here, but we haven't. Our season winner is the Planet of the Daleks.
Wow, great winner there. Great winner.
See, and we all like that vaguely.
Yeah.
I think we all like that. That's why it's won.
Yeah.
So thank you very much to James and Jason.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be back.
And thank you to anybody who is still watching, and we shall see you soon. So goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.